Welcome to the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Alex Greene, and I'm on a mission to bring the power of embodiment to people all around the world. In this podcast, we explore how embodiment practices, trauma healing, and knowledge about the human nervous system can help us find our ground, discover new sources of meaning, and create connection in an ever-changing world. The deepest change is embodied change. All right. Well, I am really excited to be sitting here with Thu Nguyen. And Thu, we met several years back. She came through our online TRE certification program early in the pandemic when we had just shifted to our online program. And Thu and I have stayed connected, and I've followed her work as a somatic coach based in Kawartha Lakes, Ontario, Canada, and she's doing very cool stuff. And so I thought today would be a lovely chance to just sit down and have a conversation with Thu and hear about her story and the very interesting work that she's doing these days. So just a quick intro. So Thu is a connector at heart. She's a founder at Nusqool, a new school where adults can connect with their true self. After burning out multiple times in a 20-year engineering career focused on wireless connectivity, Thu has made a transition as a facilitator and trauma-informed coach. She helps clients navigate uncertainty with joy by sharing practices that ground our nervous system and activate our inner resources for skills like prospection, the ability within each of us to envision what's possible. So Thu, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Alex. This is so exciting to reconnect with you in this way and know that everything I learned a few years ago from you has been pretty core to what I do now.
Oh, it's very cool to hear. So I usually just like to start with people's personal journey. I mean, almost everyone ending up in this work has some context, some life history that has led them into the field that we're in. And I'd love to hear some of that from you, if you're willing.
Sure. Maybe I'll start in the beginning. So I was born in Vietnam, and my family, my uncles came by boat to Canada. My dad went to Australia, and then me, my mom, and my brother and grandparents were in Vietnam when I was born. And then when I was young, when I was three and a half, we got sponsored to Toronto. And that's kind of where my journey started. I wouldn't have said back then that I didn't understand multi-generational trauma and war and refugee and single mom kind of trauma.
Right.
But that's how I started. And I grew up with a family of 6 uncles. And in the 80s, one of my uncles taught me how to program on a early Apple computer. And I was just hooked on wanting to work with Steve Jobs, wanting to move to Silicon Valley and all of that stuff. So I went to Waterloo for engineering, and I moved to Silicon Valley. And a lot of that time, now reflecting back, I really wanted to fit in as a guy, with my family, with engineering. I think in class there was maybe 10 women out of a class of 200. And then when I went to Silicon Valley, every team of mine was all guys. And I lived my dream life. I actually ended up working with Steve Jobs on the first iPhone. And it was a dream, except I burned out pretty hard in 2009. I ended up in the hospital.
Can I ask about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because we hear about that a lot, and I work with burnout, and to me, it's one of the things that nervous system recovery is really good for. But in my view, there's different ways to burn out, and I wonder if you could just share, because first of all, I didn't even know that about you, but that's very cool, that context, and it was a pressure cooker, evidently, at least for you. What was your style of burnout in that period?
Well, so I graduated in 2005. So between 2005 and 2009, I went to Silicon Valley. I worked 7 days a week. I want to say 12 hours a day, but sometimes my days would be over 24 hours if I had to fly overseas and continue to work. So sometimes my days were 30 hours, which was impossible.
Yeah.
And then actually either I was working or I was drinking or debauchery, kind of eating out all the time and no sense of routine or regulation. And then and also my body, I had irregular periods, maybe sometimes 6 months without one. And so my burnout looked like actually going to the hospital with a very heavy period and bleeding almost to death when I got to the hospital.
I see.
So that was the you mentioned gender equity and reconciliation work. Was when I did that, I realized like that my uterus actually had been speaking louder and louder every year of like, hey, actually you're a woman. There's certain cycles, there's a body. It's not just about the head. And so I feel like my style of burnout was actually my body protesting in the best way it could through my uterus, through my gender, through all of that to say, hey, whatever you're doing is not going to work, and life could end here. Or you can make some changes.
It's funny. My guest from last week, the one that's releasing today, he made an interesting reference, sort of a Carl Jungian view that like the first that we need to have a big failure or disruption in life that then leads to sort of the next more authentic phase of life. And Ro, the podcast guest, he said he kind of thinks of it as when you fail at the thing that you thought was like what you're supposed to be doing in the world, then that becomes and I thought of that because I feel like I hear that a little bit at this moment in your story.
Yeah. And I wish that it was the only moment of like, hey, wake up, do the right thing or something like that. But actually that was, I would say, my first near-death experience. And then I had a few more. So I would say from 2009 to when I met you, 2018, 2019, was an adventure for me from, not having the language, not having known what the body is about, not having a friend circle that knew either because they were all engineers.
Right.
I think that first one was a wake-up call, but it was a wake-up call without tools or support or community. And then I had to wake up a few more times after that and every time I think it has been meeting more healers, meeting more coaches, mentors throughout that time. So that's been 13 years now. From there has been this journey into meditation.
So that big kind of discovery and ultimately healing journey, and then now teaching and facilitating. But what were some of the key pieces that once you recognized, hey, so you needed other things besides what you had to date? What were some important pieces that you started to pull in?
Okay, so from that first time, I think what I learned was I didn't know how to live with my body, and I think the only insight from there was like it's not worth it to spend all your energy working for someone else when time is short. Like our health is wealth. That was the first nugget. So I left California, came back to Canada. Then started a startup and then another one, another one. But the next time when I went on a startup adventure, again, same thing. I gave to a point where I couldn't. And also then again, my uterus came back and said, hey, so I had a 6-month period like that never stopped. And luckily that time I met an amazing person that used to go to school with me, and she was a naturopath, and she had just came back from Thailand. And she introduced me. And well, first she was like, "Okay, you don't have to pay me anything for a year. I'm gonna help you," because all the things that she was saying were so new to me.
Right.
And so that's what she was my first angel, I would say, that stopped the bleeding. And then also at that time, it wasn't just bleeding and being overweight. It was cancer in my uterus.
I see.
So that was 2011. So 2 years after the first one. And so she helped me advocate for myself and my uterus. And all the doctors told me to get a hysterectomy, and I did not. And I looked for out. So that was another big wake-up call to deal with the questions of being a woman, pregnancy. Do I want a child? What is it to be a woman without a uterus? So that was another big wake up for me. And thank goodness that time her name's Lily. She introduced me to Vipassana meditation, acupuncture, Qigong, things around the body. And it was very new to me. And I think the saving part of me is I'm super curious. And so when it was so new, it's like, oh, what is that? So that was that. She sent me on the last 10 years of adventure around those things. Qigong. I eventually found a Tai Chi teacher in San Francisco, and I've done medical Qigong. So those tools got added to my repertoire and meditation.
I see.
And then fast forward some more. More startups, more burnout, and more awareness as well. The final straw was 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
I had gone to a yoga therapy workshop, and it was a bunch of yoga therapists that were practicing diagnosing people. And so at that time, again, I was in another startup, really stretched thin. And then the teacher that came from India, his name is Dr. NC. He looked at me and he said, "If you don't leave your job, you're going to die." And again, at that time, I was actually in a coaching certification course already. And so I was on the way. But that was another nudge towards the body is going to tell me what I can or cannot do. So that's why I left my job for the last time, I think. And then I did sign up for this coaching certification. And around that time, this leads to TRE, is that I was having, again, my pelvic floor area. I was having like incontinence, bladder issues. And so I went to my doctor, and then I went to a pelvic floor specialist, wanting to know what was going on there. And so my pelvic floor specialist, looked at my pelvic floor, touched it, and it was super inflamed, super painful and all of that. And I don't think I ever knew that, it was a blocked area that I had never felt before. And then so I would say that was 10 out of 10 in pain. And she was like, well, if you want to get better, it's not about building muscle. You actually have to learn how to let go in the pelvic floor. And so she gave me exercises like the butterfly, yoga stuff. And then I talked to my friend who's a yoga teacher, and she was like, I want to try something called TRE. And I was like, okay. So she showed me it just over Zoom. She's in California. And this was just a week before that, after that session. And I might have tremored for, I don't know, like 5 minutes or something like that. And that I'd never felt that before.
Sure.
Um, and then the next week I went to the pelvic floor specialist, and my pain had gone from 10 out of 10 to like 4 out of 10.
Nice.
Um,
Yep.
which then I was like, what is this? Like, what just happened? This has never happened before. And
Well, wait, can I ask a quick
and
question?
then
Wait, let me ask you a question.
yeah,
So
go ahead.
with that initial 5 minutes of, TRE, did it feel meaningful at that time? Like when you did those 5 minutes, was it like, oh, this is curious? Or was it like, wow, something happened here, but I don't know what it was? Like what was that initial experience like?
It was full again of curiosity of like, what is this?
Hmm.
Like, I've never seen my body move without me making it
Guiding it.
move.
Yeah.
And I could really resonate with like, there is no way I could force my body to move in this way. So I was like, what? This is so, I was giddy and I was
Sure.
like, wow, this is so cool.
Okay.
But I don't think like the impact to the tension down there,
Hmm.
I don't think, I mean, I didn't expect it to do anything.
Right. Right.
So when it was awesome that I went back to my physio or the pelvic floor person, and she was like, oh, wait, you don't feel any pain, or you feel very little. I was like, oh, so that honestly, it was a practice that really literally helped me with my bladder issues. And again, same area of tension in the pelvic floor.
Sure.
Yeah. Should I go on? So that was
Well, yeah, I guess.
my
Well,
first
okay, well,
one.
let me ask a question about that. So it's from that one session, it was promising. At least something had shifted you from a 10 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10, and sounds like you kind of attributed it to the tremoring. So then, did you start doing it regularly? And what was happening in that first few months or whatever?
Yeah, so I Googled it. My physio or the pelvic floor specialist didn't know what TRE was. So I was looking for trainers in Toronto and just
Yeah.
like really ate up everything I could find on the internet. And there was a trainer with a course, I think like a couple weeks later from my initial experience.
Okay.
So I went to the class, but mostly it was like, what the heck is this? I really want to learn more about what is going on with my body. And then after that class, I really wanted to learn from someone on like how to do it properly and what's flexible and what's not.
Right.
And right after that class, I went into because I usually do Vipassana sits, like 10-day meditation sits every January.
Sure.
So that was in January. And right when I learned the steps, I got like a little handout. It's probably not what you do at a 10-day silent retreat, but I ended up tremoring every day.
Yeah.
And honestly, it helped with meditation. It helps with, sitting all day in a lotus position.
Yeah.
And I was sold, sold and understanding that there was something here that really feels good. And I think when you do go in a place where things are quiet and you're listening to yourself, I think those 10 days was essentially what really validated in my body that this was a practice for me.
Yeah.
So that was January.
Okay.
And I think that was the year of COVID.
Right.
So I think it just lined up that year that I was doing TRE maybe like, I don't know, every day or 3 times a week or something. Actually, three times a week. And that was when I started. I don't know how I found you, but it was TRE online training, and I really, really wanted to learn about the physiology side, like trauma and how the body works.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, like, with your
happened.
kind of like engineering background, what was it like for you to kind of learn? I mean, and maybe probably even before you joined our course, you had done some study, but like, I'm just curious, sort of, as you started to learn about neurophysiology, what was that exciting for you? Interesting? What was the impact?
Okay, I'll be honest. The first couple of courses, there were words I had no understanding of, no idea. I probably fell asleep a lot in the course. But I did like go back and listen to the videos over and over.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, because I got into, like the body keeps score,
Mm-hmm.
when the body says no, like it
Mm-hmm.
was like I got it,
Mm.
but definitely from an engineering background to to the body, it was a lot in a short period of
I
time.
see.
And I was moving, so during COVID, I was in certification.
Mm.
My husband got laid off, and then we essentially decided that actually to make things work, we needed to leave Toronto, sell our condo,
Mm.
and move in. And we found the most perfect place, like a old schoolhouse in Kawartha Lakes that
Mm.
was closer to his mom.
Mm.
And it was the same price as a 1-bedroom condo in the city.
Right.
So it just it felt like we had to go out there. So training with you and Ellen was right in the middle of that, which was I think maybe on the overwhelming side at first.
Mm.
But I think it helped me throughout that process to have a way to ground.
Got it. Yeah, very cool. Does TRE remain in a minute here, we'll shift to what you're doing with other folks, but like does TRE and Vipassana, Qigong, are these still sort of part of your, embodiment practices at this stage of your journey?
Yeah. So I'll say, I mean, even an example of a few weeks ago, I was watering my garden and my dog found a chipmunk and pulled my arm, and um, it was a tear in my
Mm.
rotator cuff.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and it was a lot of pain and all that stuff. And I had to travel that day, so I was figuring out, should I go to the hospital or should I go to the plane?
Mm.
But once I was visiting my brother, so he's a doctor, and he was just like, "Well, can you move your arm?" And I could.
Mm.
But throughout, so what I did when I got into the house was that my body was in shock,
Mm.
and it wanted to tremor. So I did,
Yeah.
and I felt fine. Well, I mean, fine-ish. Like I had to get ice and
Yeah. Yeah.
like a sling and all that stuff and go to the airport. But I think, yes, I practice regularly, and I find that teaching, like I have weekly shakes
Yeah.
for people that I've taught TRE to.
Sure.
So I find teaching and doing my own practice has helped, but also kind of having that pause every time something, not that happens ever, but to know that I do have a tool that actually like helps my body release rather than kind of trying to hold in anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even in between coaching clients, some Qigong, some TRE. I don't think I've ever talked to like asked any of my teachers about this, but now in the Wuji Qigong position, like the doing nothing standing position.
Yeah. Yep.
I tremor.
Yeah. You shake. Yeah.
Like and it happens every single time. So I almost have combined Qigong and Tai Chi with TRE because
Sure.
it happens every day.
Yeah. 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 Oh, cool. Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's shift to the work you're doing with folks.
Okay.
And so, and then, Nusqool. So just paint a big picture of what you're up to these days.
Okay, sure. I think on the lines of like moving to Nusqool.
Yeah.
This was 3 years ago, August 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. We moved.
Okay.
And I just finished my certification in coaching, just working my way through the TRE certification.
Yep.
I had just done medical Qigong level A and level B. All of that all happened at once.
Okay.
And then I needed some time to unpack and figure out, what am I doing in the country? What is all of that?
And it sounds like you couldn't resist the urge to do another startup, perhaps. as in Nusqool.
Yeah. So the good part was that it was COVID, and so I didn't have to like invite people over or anything and teach anything right away.
Right, right.
I started coaching for an online platform called Better Up, and then so that I was figuring all of that out,
Yeah.
and what I was going to do. And last year, there was an organization called Corliss, which formerly was CEO, and it's an organization of women helping women founders. And they reached out saying, "Hey, Thu, you have a lot of practices. Do you think you can create a course for our network of women?
Mm-hmm.
Because they usually meet around the topics of money, right? Like in startup stuff.
Sure.
And I have that background, but they were asking me like, can you help us deepen the connection in the community?"
Mm.
And so I was like, hey, I do TRE, I do Qigong, I'm really interested in trauma.
Yeah.
So the course that I proposed, so it's all open-ended, that I was like, oh, can we do an embodiment circle? And I was really deep into IFS, kind of figuring out parts and healing a lot of trauma with my mom and family.
Sure.
So I borrowed that framework in IFS of the 8 C's and 5 P's of your true self.
Yeah.
And so I proposed that we did a 3-month course where every week the women can come and I would, it's either myself or some friends of mine, our colleagues, and that we would create a program focused on each of those C's and P's.
Let's take a minute for listeners. The 8 C's and the 5 P's are, kind of a core part of the IFS or internal family systems model thinking. Can we list them off?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
I better be able to know. So I start with curiosity.
Yeah.
I think that's like the main one. So through curiosity, there's calm, clarity, compassion, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness.
Mm.
And then the P's are presence, patience, perspective, persistence, and playfulness.
Mm.
And the idea, which I loved when I heard it from Richard Schwartz, and then also from a coaching lens of everyone is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole.
Mm-hmm.
I love breaking it down to every single human being, no matter what we've experienced, no matter the trauma, no matter whoever we are, we have access to these parts, these characteristics of ourselves.
Sure.
And my observation, both being a coach and also working with people through trauma, has been a lot of the work is focused on, what's wrong, what's the blockage, what's that not fixing, but like the problem. Whereas like, I think there's room just to work on creativity, curiosity, all of these C's and P's in a way that doesn't bypass the hard work,
Right.
but like it's like going to the gym and building muscles. And what I found over the last couple of years is when people are connected to even one C,
Right. You
or
just need
two,
one
or
entry
three.
point. Yeah.
You just need one. Their outlook on life, the way they approach problems and challenges, it changes fundamentally.
Yeah.
So I loved having a group hire me
Right.
to create a 3-month circle.
That is so
online.
cool. Well, just let me take a moment to just, I just want to add to that idea, this idea that, sort of first finding the connection to, capacity, whether, or, these aspects of the self, the C's or the P's, to me is such an important piece of, that really resonates with my own healing model that coming from TRE, somatic experiencing, IFS. They all share this idea that if we can first, because, like you say, when we're trying to heal, we can really steer our mind, via the negativity bias. We can focus on what's wrong. Right. And, that makes sense because that's what we're trying to get to shift. but each of those disciplines recognizes that if you can identify the connection, like you say, you only need one gateway or several, and then from there, that's something that can be built. And in my view, especially, so in IFS, the concept of self energy, the more of that we can harness, the easier it is to work with the woundings or the challenged parts of the system. And in SE and TRE, we say the same thing, which is the more in SE we sometimes say blue, but a ventrovagal would be the polyvagal term for it. The more of that ventrovagal safety we can generate first, now our ability to work with challenges and wounds and stuff is just way amplified. So I love that that's your framework for this course.
Yeah, so it was a resounding success, I would say, last year.
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of my own healing and work to hold space
Was this
for a course
online
like that.
or in person or both?
Yeah, it was online.
Okay, yeah.
And people were all over the place.
And
in North
it was
America,
women business people. Is that the audience?
Yeah, basically women changing the world
Okay.
and working on the UN Sustainable Goals.
Okay. Yep.
So really amazing women that are mission driven.
I see.
And helping, doing something positive and amazing.
So is that program from last year, is that Nusqool, or did that then become Nusqool?
Yeah, so I live in Nusqool, like the schoolhouse is where I live. And I think that was the beginning of being able to synthesize my learnings, and also uncovering that I do have amazing colleagues and friends around me that are way better, to be honest, to teach some little C's than me. So this year, so that went well, and the feedback was like, when can we do this again? I want more. So this year in February to May, I created a Nusqool version of that course. I added a few, like I added kindness and gentleness, which is because I love teaching those topics. But again, I pulled in more community, like I pulled in other new teachers, and then so since this course, it was bigger. It was I think 12 people in this course, and 8 facilitators, and I've been sitting on the ripples of this learning and witnessing people's transformations in front of my eyes. Like it was, I am about gentleness and kindness and connecting to your higher self for peace.
Right.
And I could see it, like it happened with amazing success stories of people changing jobs, like just big transformations, in one person being sick and low energy into now having purpose and energy and being able to do things in the world and help others. So it's so since May, and I think this has been like you're right, I can't help myself. I was creating
you couldn't help yourself.
A startup.
well, wait a minute. Okay, so it's Nusqool. So then you said you live there. Does that mean that this is, so how would you describe it? Is this like is it a people can be in residence? Can you just describe a little bit the physical, the infrastructure, I suppose? Yeah.
Yeah, I live in an old schoolhouse. It was built in 1922 and was a real, like a single room schoolhouse. And I don't know if it's where you are, but here, back then, if you had a community with about 100 people and maybe 20 kids, the Ontario government would give you the budget to build a school for your community.
I see.
So it's like a single room schoolhouse, just one long desk, and then a teacher would teach every grade.
Sure.
So I live in that. So
I'm thinking of scenes from Anne with an E. Did you watch that Netflix special?
No.
Well, it's about Anne of Green Gables, but it's set in in PEI in Canada, and there's just a lot of scenes of the one
Oh,
room schoolhouse. Anyway,
the single rooms.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I live in one of
yeah,
those. It has been modernized inside, and outside there's maple trees, and it's about an acre of property outside.
right.
So because I moved there during COVID, all my programming has been online until now. So essentially, I think the last 3 years has been to synthesize, like, heal myself, discover what's working, what's transformative,
Right.
what tools work, and people.
Yeah.
And what's happening now is I have some in-person workshops all summer. Like, for example, this Sunday, I'm teaching TRE. We're calling it Nervous System Reset.
Mm.
And it's a combination of with a teacher that yoga teacher that I taught TRE to.
Mm.
We're doing it together, and it's Qigong, yoga, Pilates, TRE, all in one, kind of an exploration of the body.
Sure.
So Nervous System Reset, in that program, we created like a 2-hour program. We're going to be doing that in nature as well with another group, and then in other yoga studios. So that's kind of where I am this summer, is to bring some of that programming into other spaces. And for my own space, because it is our house, we're now gonna launch soon, maybe like a Kickstarter kind of crowdfunding campaign to build a classroom outside of our schoolhouse, so that we can have like a loft. We can have maybe camping and residencies in that way.
Yeah.
But also have a space where we can invite teachers like you here.
Good. I was in my mind. I was like, how am I going to get an invitation? Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah, and also to be able to design that so that we could stream, we could like record high quality content.
Right.
Because my tech background, I
Yeah.
do know
You can't leave that fully behind. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you're asking me, in the next year, Nusqool hopefully will have a functioning 4-season classroom with guest teachers, and then also it would have online workshops, content, because I realize there's a limited amount of people that want to travel to rural Ontario. But yeah, I think that's you're catching me right at the visioning and the brainstorming and the kind of harnessing what the lessons we've learned and the signs too of like, hey, we're on the right path right now. Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Before we wrap up, because I know I want to respect your end time today. Could we touch briefly on the gender reconciliation work? Because I don't know a lot about it, but I know we have a shared colleague, a TRE person in Desiree English in South Africa, who's been big in that work. And you told me you guys, had crossed paths, and it's probably a big topic. But can you just share a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah. So, yes, I'm going to be seeing Desiree, I think, in August in a in-person training in Chicago.
Oh, great.
So I had a friend, this was in my Silicon Valley life. She went to a Jerry retreat, came back, and even the name of it, like Gender Equity and Reconciliation, she was like, you have to go to. And I was like, gender, I'm good. I know my gender. I don't really have any issues. So it took a long time. It took COVID. So after I did the TRE training, the next summer I did the Jerry. Some months later, I did the Jerry workshop. Okay. And it was online. So it was 7 weeks. Okay. And it was transformative in a way where it wasn't just a women's circle, but it was men and women together, sharing stories and different ways of witnessing each other's pain and being whatever. Basically, what I learned was there is no winning gender. We all have experiences. We all have pain in being whatever gender we are, or gender fluid. Yeah. And it uncovered a story of mine, which was guys have it great and girls don't,
I see.
which was running pretty deep in me.
Yeah.
And that course really made me realize that actually all human beings go through different things, and it really humanized for me the other gender,
I see.
especially in my past. I was physically abused, sexually
Yeah.
abused, and I think a lot of stories from there kind of informed me in the story of like, yeah, men have it good and women don't.
Sure. Yep.
And it really broke that apart. And I was again hooked, because I always get hooked when these stories get uncovered. And just that process, that 7 weeks of the online experience, which isn't normal. I think before COVID, there was in-person workshops of Jerry work.
Right.
And that Jerry work started in South Africa. It blew up in South Africa. They worked with Desmond Tutu, and like there's a lot of support because there's a lot of gender violence there. And so if you want to solve gender violence, gender equity and reconciliation is a way for men and women to be in the same room and not want to hurt each other.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other realization out of all of that is, again, the story of my uterus.
Right.
Throughout is I realized, and there was an exercise which was like mapping your gender story.
Sure.
Yep. And drawing, and mine was a uterus with blood and that flow, and realize it was really the big breakthrough for me during that course was, I really thought I wanted to be a guy, like to fit in.
Right.
Not because I have a husband, I'm, cisgender, all that stuff,
Right.
But it was a silly thing I always put under the rug, which was I wanted to be a guy because of patriarchy, because of all of that. It's the winning gender. It was so helpful for me to name that, for which, again, I then became a Jerry facilitator because it's like, wow, what is this process? Because it was so helpful for me. So that was a 1-year program last year. And then now they're starting to do in-person training. And the funny thing is, in the Jerry facilitator program, Desiree taught everyone TRE. And I was just like, what are the odds? Like, because I had learned TRE last year.
These two worlds intersected. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's super helpful. And then also, I think the in-person one, we're going to be doing holotropic breath work as well. So it's just, so this, was it March? The Jerry founders were here in Waterloo, where I used to go to school for engineering. But I got invited to be a facilitator in Waterloo, but in a completely different part of the school, like the peace studies part of the school, which I had never paid attention to when I was in school.
Right.
So that's been an amazing part of my healing journey as well. To like, what are the odds again of like the only time they're in Ontario is at my old school, and I got to come and facilitate and share my story.
Yeah. Wow. Kind of a full circle kind of a situation.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, Thu, this has been really valuable. So wonderful. Anything we should, any closing note here?
One, thank you. Thank you so much. It felt like there was a flow of us connecting right now in this time.
Yeah.
I would invite, if any listener is resonating with what I'm doing, you can tell this is new and emergent, and I'm all about kind of the emergent design and holding space for what's supposed to unfold. So I'm happy for anybody to reach out.
And we'll put your links and whatnot in the description. And let's just spell it verbally. So Nusqool is NUSQOOL.net. And so that would be an easy way to connect with Thu. Anyway, Thu, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Red Beard Embodiment Podcast. To learn more, visit us at redbeardsomatictherapy.com or send me an email at alex@redbeardsomatictherapy.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, help spread the word by subscribing and sharing with others. Hope to see you next time.